since this is a Halloween program, I'm going to tell you that how I created it was the same method that was used by Dr. Frankenstein on his creation. Just kind of rip stuff from here and there, and so I know there's maybe a couple people in here that remember Halloween 1924. And there's definitely people here that remember Halloween 1954. So if you have any comments during, or if I get something wrong, because I was born so far after 1954 that I may not have gotten everything correct. Well, and we're privileged to have Roger here because he remembers Halloween 1890.
1891.
Okay. So, 1924 and 1954 were a century apart and half a century ago. They were also 30 years apart from each other, which is 30 years, 360 months, 10,958 days, 262,980 hours, and then you can read the minutes and seconds for yourself because I can't see it from here. And so when you're dealing with Halloween and any other holiday, what's going on in the world and the country has a great effect on how it's celebrated and observed. So one of the things that 1924 and 1954 have in common is that there was an economic boom happening at both those times. One was they were the roaring 20s, you know, money was free-flowing and all of that. 1954 was part of the post-World War II booms. You had the economic boom, the baby boom, everything was booming. So everybody was exuberant and happy. In 1924, we'll get into that, and in 1954 it was a little different as far as people feeling safe worldwide. So, oops, there we go. This is Roger when he was a child.
Just pick on Roger Day. That's okay.
I was just going by the clothing. So, again, what was happening in the world and in the country was very important on how these things were celebrated. So in 1924, the major world news events were that Ellis Island closed as an immigration entry point in the United States. The Wrigley Building in downtown Chicago was finished. U.S. Army planes, first round-the-world flight, and this was the first round-the-world flight for Army planes, not all together. Indian Citizenship Act was passed, and this photo had something to do with that. I don't remember what. I got a there's the Indian rights. And Wilhelm, some German guy, wins the Nobel Prize for the electrocardiogram, which he invented, which he's shown here. Macy's were putting the finishing touches on their first parade, Thanksgiving parade. And as scary as that looks, this is even scarier. J. Edgar Hoover was appointed head of the Bureau of Investigation, later called the FBI. And Lieutenant Russell Monahan completes the first daylight hours of a transcontinental flight. So he flew transcontinentally completely in daylight. So it was the modern era in its young days. In 1924, the U.S. was still filled with exuberance from winning World War I. The general feeling of, we're safe, prevailed. And in the roaring 20s, feeling good and having fun was the name of the game. Halloween in 1924 was more trick than treat. Since people felt safe, their activities tended to be on the not so safe side. Scary fun was in. The focus was pranking and scaring people. One favorite way of doing that was called tick-tocking. Tick-tocking, as shown, was firing a projectile of some kind, usually a bean or a small pebble, at people's windows through straws to make a noise and frighten the occupants. I don't know if anybody here ever did that, but another practice, so the first practice was tick-tack. The second practice is tick-tacking, which involved a little musical instrument that you stood outside of a person's window in the dark to scare them. You made kind of a rattling sound. Also, petty thievery was also a big part of the holiday. Kids would roam the neighborhoods stealing small items, which the residents would leave out for them to steal. Many items were not attached. Many times there was not attached to the items, a note attached to the items, asking the kids to please return the items when they were done stealing it, which they did. This is my grandpa Blair Wentworth. This is 1924. Would have been a couple years after he graduated from high school, or 8th grade graduation, let's say. He was a 22-year-old farm boy in 1924, and he would tell stories about what Halloween was like then. At that time, the boys would be let loose on Halloween night to join up with their friends and roam the night pulling pranks on neighbors. A favorite one was to take buggies and wagons and put them on tops of barns and houses. So when the farmer woke up in the morning, he would find his conveyance on top of a building. It also worked well with cows, but not so well with horses. Being the cows would stand, the horses would try to jump off. So they did it with cows, but not horses. Occasionally a goat, they could find one. And sometimes things did not go as planned. One time, after they tipped over a neighbor's outhouse in the dead of night, the neighbor stuck his head out of the hole and demanded that they tip it back upright so he could exit the structure. Of course, they did not tip over the 2-story outhouses. The bulk of the next day was spent going back around and unpranking those they had pranked. It was just good manners. In some instances, the pranks got out of hand. In 1924, violence and criminal vandalism were very high, very much part of the holiday, even here. One instance occurred in this vicinity of Spragueville, just about 1 or 2 miles west of Spragueville. No farmer named Tim lived on what is now known as Iron Bridge Road. And as the story goes, a team and buggy were carrying several men home, and they had spent the evening in the village of Spragueville at the tavern. And as they came to Tim's place, one of them says, "Come on, boys, let's whip old Tim." So they all got out of their wagon or whatever they were in, and they just, nobody locked their doors at that time, so they just walked in. Tim was in bed, and when he found out what they wanted, he was happy to oblige them. He just reached under the bed, pulled out an oak slat, and I guess they were happy to get out of there with what they had left. But there was no more talk of whipping old Tim. In order to curb the rowdy and violent behavior, many communities, not communists, communities, organized parties so that youngsters would enjoy themselves without destroying property or playing pranks on their neighbors. Ironically, Christian churches were among the first to organize and hold such events, which were always held in the church parlors. So this is St. John's. This is the new Lutheran church in Preston when it was new. So from the Preston Times, I have a new pointer, it's shaped like a mouse. So there's the article describing what happened. And that's from, it was printed in the Preston Times on October 30th, 1924. St. John's Lutheran Church in Preston held a Halloween party for young members of the congregation. 65 boys and girls attended the party. Everyone was given a spooky reception and was made to feel at home by the ghosts and the witches. The evening was spent playing games such as checkers, jacks, and dominoes, and was enjoyed by all present. After a delicious Halloween lunch, the party came to a close. Other community groups also got into the Halloween party idea. Preston's Women's Clubs and the home charity Rebecca Lodge organized a party in 1924. And then these are the articles, just briefly talking about what went on. Pretty much the same. Everything was decorated with pumpkins and candles, and a good time was had by all. Even the young people, or even the older people, got into it. These are young adults. They were probably in their 20s. These are people from out in my neighborhood, Spragueville. Nick and Minnie Tilmany and John and Annie Regenweather, sitting among the fallen leaves, getting into the spirit of things. And Halloween was taken very seriously in 1924. The Preston Times actually published this warning in their newspaper. And they were very serious about Friday evening is Halloween, the night of spooks, witches, goblins, and jack-o'-lanterns. Better nail down your porch furniture, lock up your buggies, wagons, and cars, and avoid the dark places, for the goblins will get you if you don't watch out. My experience, the goblins will get you wherever you are, but... Okay, here are just some images of 1924 Halloween. Maybe just one. Okay, so this is, I pulled this off the internet, but this is kind of a well-dressed Halloween party in 1924. And you can see all the motif, you know, the jack-o'-lanterns and Jack jumping over the jack-o'-lanterns and all this kind of spooky stuff. And this is a Halloween card, greeting card, that was available in 1924. So it's the pumpkin man scaring the cat, I guess. So in 1954, the major news events where Senator Joseph McCarthy is censured for bringing an end to his witch hunt of the communists. The first Indochina War was fought and ends. The Supreme Court ruled on Brown versus Board of Education, stating that segregation of public schools was unconstitutional. President Eisenhower signed a new bill, Social Security bill, funded by employers and employees rather than the government. Hydrogen bomb test was conducted on the Bikini Atoll in the Pacific Ocean. The words, "Under God," are added to the U.S. Pledge of Allegiance. The first sub 4-minute mile run was run in May 6th of that day by Roger Bannister. And Swanson introduced TV dinners.
And cake mixes.
What?
And cake mixes, really.
Oh, yeah, cake mixes.
They just changed it.
So, but in the 1950s, the image of Halloween changed. Instead of masked pranksters egging front porches, children would trick-or-treat. The world was a much scarier place than it had been in 1924. The people didn't feel safe anymore, so their activities tended more toward the whimsical. Pranks and violence gave way to trick-or-treating and embracing the spooky magic of the holiday. These are all people you would know if they took their masks off. It was in my grandma's kitchen, so. Kids' Halloween parades, with them in costumes, were all the rage. Even adults were joining in the fun. And there was a masquerade party at Twin Springs, which was a resort community at the time. It was a tourist place. It had a swimming pool, a gas station, all that kind of stuff. And that was in the eastern part of Washington Township. It's still a place if you know where to look, but don't blink your eyes. There's Twin Springs as it was at one time. That picture was undated, but I think it's a little later. It might be 1950s. The cars look about right. So for Twin Springs, the former tourist resort was still a busy place in 1954. This was also the era when Halloween merchandising was coming into its own. With the economy still in the post-World War II boom, conspicuous consumption was the new American way of life. Corporations and retailers were quick to jump on board. Everything was packaged and marketed with a holiday motif. So this is an ad from the Bellevue Ben Franklin's. And they advertised everything from fresh candy to costumes to tableware. Even the ice cream maker got into it, featuring ice cream that was goblin for goblins. A fairly new aspect of the holiday was added to the Halloween experience in the form of watching TV. Networks marketed the holiday just like the retailers did, offering such fare as Bewitched Bunny. And you can probably guess who the bunny was. This was a Bugs Bunny cartoon from Warner Brothers, and it was shown on television in Halloween 1954. A lot of television episodic television had like Halloween specials, just like they had Christmas specials and Thanksgiving specials and so on. But a tradition that survived from 1924 to 54, even till today, is carving pumpkins. And this photo is of Chucky Burns, who was the son of Mrs. Virginia Burns, and Janet Lamborn, who was the daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Cliff Lamborn, carving their jack-o'-lantern together in 1954. And this talks about a Rotary / Legion sponsored Halloween party. Community groups still organized holiday parties for the kids, like this one, held by the Rotary Club and the Timber City American Legion post at Lakehurst.
I remember going to those.
Do you?
You bet.
Did you go trick-or-treating with Roger too, or?
Well, we were probably there together. I don't know. I told my kids about how we all went to the party out at Lakehurst.
And it was a big deal.
It was a big deal.
Yep.
Yes.
And nobody got thrown in the lake, and
You know, nothing bad happened. Kids were glad to be there.
yeah.
How many kids were there?
Oh, the building was full. This was in the mid-40s. And the only story I ever heard about something bad was we rented a house, we lived on Second Street, and some of Mom and Dad's friends, there was an outhouse there yet, and they dumped it over. Friends,
Right,
yeah.
yeah. I don't know why Roger's smiling like that, maybe he knows that.
Well, I do remember that period of time where you went Halloweening and it was just part of life.
It was. Well, it was a happy time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so have all the statutes of limitations run out on all the things you did on Halloween?
There weren't any. Yeah.
Only murder stands.
Right, right, well, you know he's not saying yes. Anyway, youngsters, so in 1954, youngsters were to gather at the high school, which is now the middle school, at 6 p.m. for a parade through the downtown wearing their costumes. Afterward, buses would transport them from the city lot west of the courthouse, I'm not sure where that is, to Lakehurst. Eats, refreshments, and movies were the fun of the were the evening. Prizes were awarded for the funniest, most elaborate, and most frightening costumes. The Kirchhoff Ice Cream Company and the Royal Crown Bottling Company and the Maquoketa Bottling Company furnished the ice cream and the pop. The Pastime Theater in Maquoketa advertised 3 movies for the Halloween weekend in 1954. They were Drums on the River, starring Audie Murphy and Walter Brennan. Susan Slept Here, starring Dick Powell and Debbie Reynolds and Anne Francis. And on Halloween night, a special midnight owl showing, starting at 11:30 p.m., which was The Black Castle, starring Boris Karloff and Lon Chaney, and all seats were 50 cents. They wouldn't even let you in the door for 50 cents now. This is an article about the Lions Club Trick or Treat for used clothing. So instead of getting candy, they set aside a different night where you trick or treated and people gave you good used clothing. And so along with the booming economic times came the idea that you should help people you don't know in other countries. I always wonder where that came from. The Korean conflict put the country into the consciousness of United States citizens. Civic clubs, churches, and etc. started having Halloween parties that promoted the idea, and such as this one, which was held by the Preston Lions Legion Auxiliary in 1954. All clothes were shipped to the 304 Single Battalion in South Korea, Seoul, South Korea, who were supporting 2 orphanages there. And this is a photo from about 1954. These are school kids at the Spragueville Town School dressed up for Halloween. And I know that the boys were Joe Weiss and Jerry Bach. And they brought pumpkins, and Bruce Berg also brought a gourd for the party. And in the Preston Town School, in the 1st grade, Steve Kutzley brought a pumpkin. The room was decorated for Halloween with a skeleton right in the doorway. I'm hoping it was just a decoration. Well, you know, this is Jackson County. You don't know what you're going to come up with. And they were excited about their Halloween party which was going to happen on the 29th of October. And every day they have secret time with their teacher to tell her about the costume that they will wear. More to get it approved, I would guess, so that nothing unacceptable was brought into the school. But
they're gonna talk about it anyway, you might as well start it.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a big deal for kids.
So this is the first grade slide. And then this next one, some of you may remember. This is my Uncle Jack Stahl when he was 5. In his king costume, which was made by his mother, which won a prize as the classiest Halloween, which won a prize in his classes for the Halloween party that year. This picture was also submitted to the Quad City Times, I understand, and he was named the cutest baby of the month or something. Jerry, can you name all these people? Summer Hill School.
I can't see them well enough, so I don't know.
See, I brag you up and then,
Yeah, that wasn't my school. Make it big.
so these were unidentified kids, although I would swear that kid was a Zymet, but I have no proof. And so in this picture, you can see the outdoorsman carrying his teddy bear. I'm not sure if Daniel Boone did that or not. But this girl is holding something which I think was, she won first prize for her costume that year. I think that's what it is.
What year was that, John?
It was undated, but somewhere in the 50s, 1950s. But you can see they have, you know, the Western motif with the outdoorsman and the cowboy and the little Native American girl over here clear on the end. Were all big themes.
That's Daniel Boone.
That's what
Yeah.
I'm thinking.
Yeah.
The bear.
Yeah, it's either Daniel Boone or Davy Crockett, one or the other.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure Davy Crockett didn't carry a teddy bear, but I don't know about Daniel Boone.
Quick story about Summer Hill. I was going to Fairfield, and we went to Summer Hill to play softball against Summer Hill. And Summer Hill had, the team was 8 girls and 1 boy, Lloyd Moore.
Oh.
And they almost beat us.
We'll just leave that as is. Another prank, and I'm pretty sure this happened on Halloween, but I'm not 1000% definite. Another prank, which may or may not have been on Halloween, was done at the Cherry Grove Schoolhouse in Section 25 of Brandon Township. One night, 2 couples were out on a date and happened to see a goat in the road. Being familiar with the area, they decided to take the goat and tie him up in front of the Cherry Grove School. That was Plan A. They very quickly turned to Plan B when they discovered one of the windows had been left unlocked. So they opened it, pushed the goat in, and then shut the window.
Oh.
So that in the morning, when the teacher opened up the school, she found a goat in her classroom. And
Nobody caught this.
right.
New fragrance.
Well, I'm sure the goat was happy to get out. I don't know about the teacher, but. And while all this fun was going on, we have to remember that at the same time, a real horror was hanging over their heads, which was the Korean conflict. And they were still doing selective service. They were still drafting people. People were still coming home in real coffins, not decorated ones. And so this was all playing against the backdrop of, you know, Halloween and everything that was going on at the time. So some images of 1954. This is Rath Meats 1954 Halloween ad. You can see they're pushing meat. It is Rath Packing Company. Another one is pushing Coca-Cola. Of course, here, this might have been more popular. The Royal Crown cola that was manufactured over on 2nd Street by the Marusas family. And as soon as, so the last item about Halloween appeared in the same issue of the Sentinel as this one did. So just as soon as Halloween was over, Christmas ads appeared. Now they appear before Halloween.
Yeah.
And this ad is from Graham's Toyland. So probably some of you remember when that was in operation. And now we're going to switch to images of Halloween. And these are just some images of Halloween through the years. Tell me if you recognize anybody. And pumpkins. Pumpkins are always about Halloween. And scarecrows. And this card was from a period of time, right around 1900, when everything had to be jolly. People were jolly, Christmas was jolly, Halloween was jolly, even the ghosts were jolly. Just another spooky motif. Some more jack-o'-lanterns. And this is supposed to be a depiction of a Halloween party in 1924. So you can see.
24 or 54?
What?
You're on 54 now, right?
No, these are just
Years old, okay.
wherever they. This is where the Frankenstein part comes in, because I just tacked another program that I already had done onto this to make it long enough. Stuff from 24 and 54 wasn't as easy to find as I had thought it was going to be. So instead of becoming a hopeless drunk, I decided to tack this on here. But how many of you bobbed for apples when you were a kid? How many of you were successful at bobbing for apples?
How many of us were submerged?
Submerged.
Oh.
Yeah. One of our neighbors, when we had a Halloween party one time, bobbed for apples, and she could get an apple every time and not even get the end of her nose wet.
Oh.
Ah,
Should have wiped out.
yeah.
Probably.
Well, and she had a small nose too, so. But, and here's just some decorations.
Yeah.
Those are from the 1930s. Yeah. And some more from the 1930s. The black cat doing various human things was very popular at that time. And this is just a nice Halloween card. People used to actually send people hard copies instead of digital copies of things. And this is a 1950s die-cut decoration. It would, I don't know if you had to fold it out or if it pulled out, but it was freestanding, like for decoration on a table or something like that. And this is, again, this is probably, well, 1890, near when Roger was born. And you can just see the woman is trying to be seductive, and at that time there were a lot of seductive Halloween images which I chose not to show, but there was just a, well, one of them was a U. So there was this whole mystique about the romance of Halloween and all of that that they tapped into.
It's the mystery.
Right, that's part of the romance was the mystery and everybody in masks and you know, yeah, we'll leave that. So this is just another greeting card, and this would be again from like the 1920s. This is, I think it's from the 50s. with the black cat against the big orange moon, which is smiling. And this is a Marilyn Monroe 1950s card, which again was trying to capture the mystery, the romance, the, you know, all of that. I don't know if she ever held a candle like that, but here's some more decorations. These are from the 30s. And another decoration. This is a napkin from sometime between 1925 and 1954. Some of the motifs are pretty much identical from one time to the other. And this,
Yeah.
right. I know when I was a kid, we trick-or-treated and we got some candy cigarettes, but we never actually got real cigarettes. Well, I didn't, Mark did. But, again, today this wouldn't be allowed anywhere near a kid. But there's another nice Halloween card. And a couple of girls carving pumpkins out in the field, which I don't know, was that something that was done? We always brought our pumpkins in and carved them. Did anybody carve any in the field?
It's gonna be a mess up there.
We know that.
Yes.
You look very serious, Roger. Are you thinking about something? I said you look very serious. Are you thinking about something? No? Nothing you want to share?
Well, I was going to say, I remember making a trip to the ER on a Saturday, carving pumpkins for my grandkids, and the knife went right through my hand, and I had to
There's an example of a grandma who went all out for her grandkids. We're not going to mess with fake blood, kids. We're going to go with the real stuff.
Maybe they have the corn stalk in their front yard.
That could be. I'm just going by the background. Looks like a field. Yeah. And this would be, again, from the 1920s. There's a nice card. This would be closer to the present time. You can see the Halloween graphics and stuff are more computer generated rather than drawn. And then again, back to the romance and the mystery and everything of Halloween. And this is one from the 1930s. And so cops and robbers were extremely popular in the 1930s because of Jimmy Cagney and that what they were seeing in the movies. This is one from the 1950s. And this is one from about 1900. You see the pumpkin figure, the pumpkin head as they called them, were very, very popular. And they expanded far beyond Halloween. They had them all different holidays in advertising all year long. The devil is a little menacing. You can see the one in the background is actually chasing a pumpkin head.
Those devils are just creepy.
Yeah, well,
They're just creepy.
maybe their wife told them to bring home pumpkin for pumpkin pie. You don't know. But
Don, I just happened to think of something. This would have been in the 50s. The sheriff in Clinton County would pass these cards around, and you could sign a card that you would not be destructive on Halloween. My cousin from Sherlaw and a bunch of guys, they went to a farmer's, you know, there's a hay bale stacked outside. They tore that all apart. One of the boys dropped that card.
oh,
Signed card. They all got busted. They had to go back and build that
build
haystack.
that did you sign one of those cards?
Sure I did.
Who's going to check, right? This is a Halloween napkin with the Halloween motif from 1970s. And And this is another Halloween, says Lucky Halloween. Again, all the familiar motifs are there. They didn't leave anything out. This is one, again, like from the 1890s, 1900s era. And I remember these. These are from the 60s, but they had like a little sparkler inside, and you push that lever, and it made the face sparkle, you know. And here's just a picture of some kids trick-or-treating. And I don't know if anybody has caught on to this. This young man right there, you all know, and we'll say love. And the others were my cousins and my sisters. There's another Halloween themed napkin. And this one was probably closer to the 1930s, 20s, 30s, because of, you know, the moon is very thin, and that was very fashionable, was have the moon thin at that time. And this again is romance, mystery. You know, you run into a shrouded person, and at the stroke of midnight she takes her shroud off and is a beautiful young woman. Now, if I was out on Halloween and ran into a shrouded person, I would not wait around to see what was underneath. And again, this would be 1900, 1910, something like that. There's an old witch looking in the window to see the Halloween party inside. And that would be from the 20s or the 30s. And this ad for Jell-O is from the 1950s. How many of you had Jell-O for Halloween in the 50s? And so making Jell-O in the 1950s was a lot easier than it had been in previous times, because you had refrigerators rather than ice boxes in a lot of places. And here's another, she had Jolly Halloween, and she looks like she's having fun. Here's just another Halloween card. Again, romance, mystery, all of that kind of stuff. You can see up on top of the mirror, that's a Cupid. There's Cupid up there, and it's have a lucky Halloween. And this is the Brock's Candy ad from probably late 60s, early 70s. Another napkin, more from the 50s. And now they're having a Merry Halloween, which should go back closer to the 1890s. Anybody remember these things? They're noisemakers. Another Halloween card. And here's another one, again, 1900 or so. Some more motifs. And there's I don't know if any of you ever traveled like that, but they did then. And now we're gonna do one more. Do you look familiar to anybody? So, as our time has run out, we'll end there, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Don, real quick, you talked, I didn't should say the time, but Graham's Department Store, when they, you know, the brewery is in that building, and when the workers were there in 2019, they found these big wooden crates, which our merchandise is in, and it's from we have 4 of them, I wish we had more. They were the first cash registers came to us.
Oh, wow.
So, and you have a picture up. One of them has really nice, you can really still read it. It's from, National Cash Register company in Dayton, Ohio. But they said, you want these? I'm like, and these do look like on eBay, they're like $250 for one. So if they ever had another crate, we'd love to have one. But anyway, next time you're in, take a look at them.